Okay, welcome back to How to Play Dominion 6. Last time we went up to everything involved in setting up a game and a very lengthy overview of all the unit attributes, things that make units strong, things that make units weak, sort of a general overview of how combat is going to work, as well as looking at pretender design and the different blesses and what scales are and things like that. Now, of course, we've actually gotten into a game, so now we get to the meat of it, of actually recruiting units, recruiting commanders, doing research, exploring the map, and doing battle. So when you first load in, you're going to get hit with a lot of different numbers, a lot of different words and symbols and things like that. Can be a bit overwhelming, but I'm going to first go over just kind of a general overview of the UI and how to kind of read the province information and things like that. So with default settings, you're just going to start with your capital, your main province, named after your nation. So we have Ulm as our capital. And we can see on the right side, it's going to give us some information about this province that we have selected. And you can select different provinces by right-clicking. And you see that we don't really know anything about these other provinces other than terrain type. But we know quite a bit about Ulm because we own it. So on the right side, you can see first thing is that it is a plains and river province. So plains is the most generic. It doesn't really have anything special. Doesn't have any advantages, doesn't have any disadvantages. It's just like a blank slate province. But a river is a special trait that provides for higher income from that province if you control it. And there's going to be multiple different ones, such as highlands, which are going to have a lower income but a higher resource value and will also hinder movement through it. There's also farmland here, which we can see is high income but lower resources, and also has fewer magic sites, which we'll get to. Here we have also mountains, which are low income but excellent resources and more magic sites. So usually when you're looking at provinces, if you're interested in income, you want anything that's going to be along a river, or you want on farmlands. Those are usually really good for income. And then if you want more resources, you're going to be looking towards the forests and the mountains and things like that. Next, we have population. So that is the number of civilian population that's living in that province. And this determines the income value. It can determine the resource value, and it can also determine the recruitment point value of the province. So all of the sort of currencies related to recruiting units and collecting gold and things like that is going to come from high income. And if you click on population, you're going to see the ideal size of population for that province. So because this is our capital, it can obviously hold the most amount of people in the game. It's going to be an ideal size for about 25,000, whereas some provinces are going to be an ideal size for 5,000 or 10,000 or 15,000. And so that means that, assuming a neutral growth scale in that province, it's going to kind of average out to around that number. And then it gives you a breakdown of the different growth modifiers. So this province has a base population growth of 0.2%, a density penalty of minus 0.2% because it's over its ideal size now, so it's trying to, lower that back down. But then because it's on good terrain, usually, farmland or plains or something like that, it gets a bonus. And then because we have growth scale, it gets another bonus. And so every turn, this province will increase its population number by 0.4%. And so that's why if you take growth scales, you can see how the provinces that you control, if they're within your dominion, will just continue to go up and up in population, and you'll get more and more income from them and stuff over the course of the game. Whereas if you have death scales, the opposite, those numbers are all going to be kind of ticking downwards instead. So death can be, perfectly useful for certain nations that are much more interested in the short term rather than the long term. But, it's an individual decision. Okay, so then we have income. So our capital generates for us 571 gold per month, per turn. And this is obviously going to be the highest number that you're going to encounter. Most provinces are going to generate, on average, like 60 to 100 or so, depending on the type of province and things. And you can't click on this to get any more info, but this is going to be determined by, multiple things: the terrain type, the population, the scales, things like that. Resources. This is how many resources you can collect in this province every turn. So again, the capital is going to be kind of the biggest thing. And we have 227 coming in every turn to spend. And as I said before, that does not accumulate, so those are spent or lost. Same thing with recruitment points. 477 recruitment points per turn to spend, as well as 3 commander points, which you have to spend to buy commanders. They do not pull from the recruitment point cost, or pool. Then you have the supplies that are available in that province. Again, these are not accumulated. Every unit or commander that's in there that has to be fed will eat a certain amount of supplies every turn, and all that matters is if you don't have enough, they will start to starve. That's it. So we can obviously hold many, many, many units in our capital at one time, but as soon as we move out, you're not going to find many provinces that have 1,200 supplies. So if you have an army, a massive army here, consuming 1,000, and you move out, you're going to struggle to actually feed them in every province you go through. But again, like I said, it's not usually that huge of a problem. Then you have the defense value. So this is what's called province defense or provincial defense. And most provinces that you take over, well, pretty much every province you take over is going to have just one. It's going to have one province defense. Whereas your capital here, you can see has 25. So if you click on this for any province you control, you can actually spend gold to increase the local sort of provincial defense. And what this is going to do, it's various effects. It's going to reduce any unrest there every turn. If you have a certain amount, it's going to have a patrol strength. If there's any scouts, enemy scouts or spies that are lurking in that province, they might get caught because you have a large provincial defense sort of patrolling the land. And also any enemies that attack you in that province will have to go against your provincial defense, even if you're not there with any armies. So this is a one-time cost that you just spend. So we see to bump this to 25 to 26 from 25 cost us 26 gold. And then if we spend it again and again and again, that is a one-time fee that you spend. And even if the province gets attacked and your provincial defense fends them off and you lose some of those units, they will just be back right away afterwards. Even if there's a second battle in the same turn, they'll be right back. So you'll always have that number until you lose the province to an actual enemy and they take it over, or some other rare effect actually reduces PD. So the other hidden effect that it does is that it actually can prevent some certain bad events from happening in that province. There are certain random events that can occur that can actually be just outright prevented entirely and not occur if you have certain numbers of provincial defense there. There are differing opinions on how much it's worth to actually put money into your province defense. Usually I would say that if you have some spare money, putting at least 6 is like kind of bare minimum to prevent the really bad effects from happening. And I would say 11 is even kind of better. So usually I'll try to put at least 11 into every province I get. But again, these are not units that you can take out with you. These are just local police, essentially. They are not units you've recruited. They can only sit there and protect that province. And generally, they're not very good. These are not going to be really as good as units you can recruit. In Ulm's case, they kind of are the units that you can recruit. But generally, you want to spend your money elsewhere. You want to spend your money on actual units that you can put into your armies and move around and do things with, rather than investing it all into province defense. In later game, when you have just lots and lots of money, and if you're playing single player, it can be advised to throw large amounts of province defense into a specific province you really care about, because the AI can actually struggle against large amounts of province defense, and they'll throw small armies into it over and over and die. So it has been a strategy that can work for me. It has worked for me. But in the early game especially, you may just want to do kind of the minimum to prevent some bad events and not throw all your money into it, because there's better ways to spend it. All right, and then lastly here we have Unrest. Unrest can build from various effects and things like that. And can be reduced by province defense every turn. If you have every 10 PD that you put into a province will reduce the unrest by 1 each turn. And you can also take an army there and give them the patrol action to help out a little bit more to reduce unrest by larger amounts. Unrest is not a good thing. You generally don't want it in a province because it massively affects the income, the resources, the recruitment points, things like that, that the province provides for you. And if it hits 100, you can't recruit there from anymore, and it won't produce almost any money or any resources. So this is not something that's just going to go up automatically most of the time or anything like that. It's just certain effects that can do it. So it's generally not going to be a huge concern for you. But keep in mind that usually when you take over a new province, there will be a certain amount of unrest there until something gets rid of it. Something patrols and gets rid of it. So your income will be generally lowered when you first take a province until it's cleared up. Next, we have the Dominion. So this shows our scales for the province that we're in. We can see that the Dominion strength here is 2. And that's out of 10. And this normally will go up sort of on its own. I will get into the specifics of Dominion mechanics, but this will go up over time in your capital on its own with no other action on your part up to your actual Dominion strength, like your overall Dominion strength, which if you click on a temple, you can see that our Dominion strength for our nation is at 4. This can be increased over time throughout the course of the game, but not super massively for most short to mid-length games. So ours is 4. So within a handful of turns, this will be at 4, and that'll be our Dominion strength. Then you have our various scales that we've picked. So this is exactly what we had selected. Order 2, Productivity 3, Cold 1, Growth 1, and Drain 3. If we look at a different province, we see that the Dominion here is blank. And that's not really because we can't see it. Well, I guess that could be. I'm not quite sure. But you will find plenty of provinces that have like no Dominion whatsoever. And that's because nobody's nation has kind of affected it yet. And we'll get to that in a second. Then you see the various buildings and any sites that are located in that province. So we have our main citadel. We have a laboratory, which is for magic stuff, and a temple, which is used for spreading Dominion. And then our special magic sites here, or special locations, the Keep of Ulm and the Forges of Ulm. Okay. At the top, we have, of course, the name of our pretender and the current season, the current turn that it is. So it's right now it's spring in the year 0, turn 1. We see our treasury amount. We have 600 gold available to us. We see our income amount. So every turn, because of our provinces, we're going to be bringing in 571 gold. And then next to that is the upkeep. So every turn we are spending 27 gold on upkeep costs. And if you click on that, it'll show you a breakdown of exactly where this upkeep is coming from. So our commanders and our units. Also, if you click on the treasury button, it'll show you how much you're planning on spending this turn on any new units, new commanders, province defense, things like that, for an overall breakdown of what you're spending this turn before you hit the end turn button. And then to the right of that, we see our magic gem income. So because we have the Forges of Ulm in our capital, we're getting 5 earth gems every turn. Along the very top bar, there is a whole bunch of buttons for various UI subscreens. And before we get to that, I will remind you just again that you can press the question mark button on your keyboard, shift question mark, which will bring up the hotkeys. And obviously for the main map screen, this main screen, there's a lot of them. How many of those you end up using is entirely up to you, but I will recommend just a couple that I think will save a lot of people a lot of time in the long run, that I use the most often, and that's going to be T the T button, which will bring up your army setup screen to show you all your commanders in the province and units in the garrison and in their squads. That's going to be used very often. And then the R button, which brings up the recruitment screen for you to recruit new units or commanders from that province. Those are going to be used very often. You're probably going to use those at least once or twice every turn, so that can just save you some time. But those are the two first buttons on this menu. Army setup here with the two swords. That's that. Recruitment, second one. Third one is bid for mercenaries. So you can spend gold in order to put in a bid for a mercenary company. These can be useful for certain nations that might struggle in the early game or something like that to just get a bunch of units all at once very quickly. So you put in a bid for money, and you don't lose that money if you don't win the bid, if some other nation bids a higher amount than you. But if you do get the bid, then obviously that money is gone. And the mercenaries that you're going to get will arrive at some location and within your control, and you will have them for 3 turns. So you can control them for 3 turns. You can't modify their squads or anything like that. You can set up their kind of formations a little bit and script them in battle, but you can't modify them in any way. And there's no penalty for you really if these units die, or if the mercenary company entirely just gets wiped out. But you have them for 3 turns max, and on that 3rd turn you can try to bid again, and you actually get like a half price discount on bidding in order to maintain the mercenary company in your control. But if you lose the bid or you decide not to bid, they will depart and go somewhere else. So for Ulm, we don't really need mercenaries because our infantry is very strong in the early game anyways, so that's fine. This one, the Province Chronicles. This will tell you if any events that have occurred there, things like that. If something happened there and you don't remember what it was or what the details were, you can click on that, tell you some information. Messages. This will bring up the messages screen, which shows up at the start of every round. You can send messages. This allows you to send text messages, gold, magic gems, blood slaves, magic items, or non-aggression packs to any other nation that you have kind of made contact with, which means that you share or you're adjacent on some sort of province. Obviously, single player, you're not going to be sending gold or gems or anything to AI. It's just, that won't really benefit you in any way, but you might use this to send non-aggression packs with different nations. F1 is the nation overview. This will show you all your provinces, all your commanders, the resources and supplies of each province, the income. It'll show you the province defense of each one, and you can actually click on the province defense from this screen. So if you've neglected it for a time and you decide, oh, I got some money, I want to put PD in, you can just go to this screen. It'll show you all your provinces, and you can just click on each one and add it from there. So that's handy. The score graphs, if you're playing with these, it'll show you all the different information for each nation. There's sort of ongoing stats. Hall of Fame, this is going to be for commanders that have earned a certain amount of XP and a certain amount of kills and stuff. They'll be placed onto the Hall of Fame, and they actually get an additional benefit for being on the Hall of Fame. The Pretenders of the World, this shows you all the players in the game, and you can click for their sort of national information. So if we click on this, we see of Ulm stuff. If we click on this, we see the information for Man, things like that. And if you sort of observed a battle with them and they use their blessing, it will show you their blessing here, and you can click on it to see the information for that, which can be useful. All right. Next to that, F5 is the research tab. This is very important. Another one you're going to be opening pretty frequently. This is going to show you all the different magic schools that you can put research points into, your current level with them, and how many research points are remaining for you to level up. We'll get to that in a second. Global enchantments. I'm not really going to cover these. These are big ongoing magic rituals players can cast. And once they're cast, everyone kind of is aware of them and where they came from. The magic item treasury. This is sort of like your magic item inventory that you can look at any time. get to magic items later, as well as magic item overview of what you can actually create. And then the Thrones of Ascension shows you all the names of the thrones, how many points they're worth, and it will show if anyone has claimed any of these thrones. Lastly, options. Yeah, most of this is going to be pretty self-evident, but I will recommend when you start playing to go into preferences and just modifying a couple of things in the gameplay section. This is partly personal preference, but some I think are just kind of good recommendations. So one is I like to have click outside window to close it, so I don't actually have to press escape or go to the exit button or something. You can just click outside this sub window. I also recommend give orders to new commanders automatically. This will just put mages, as soon as you make them, it will put them on automatically researching, which is usually what you want a mage to do anyways when you make it. And this way you don't have to manually go through every mage you recruit and put them on research and then blah, blah, blah. You know, they just automatically do it and they'll be on research. And then the other one would be multi-turn movement. So normally you can only issue a command to move an army to a province that they can reach this turn. But this allows you to queue up multiple moves if you select a more distant province. I'm not sure why this isn't on by default, but I highly recommend it. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm sure you can figure it out. Okay, and then the last one there is the end turn button, which is also the E key. We'll do that later. Okay, and then on the left side, we have a couple of names and a couple of figures here. These are the commanders that are present in this province. So our nation of Ulm starts with 2 commanders. We have Erkborn, a commander of Ulm, military commander, and we have Sigbert, a spy. So they are both sitting here. This sword icon signifies that he is actually holding units. And there will be more sword icons if he has more units. And if you press T, you can see the units that he has under his command. And then the number below that is his map move number. So if we go here, normally he has a map move of 10. But because there are certain units in his army, you can only move as fast as the slowest unit in your army. So he's down to a map move of 8, whereas Sigbert by himself, he has 16. So that's what that number is. And then they're both on the defend command. So you can left click on them to select them, and this allows you to issue move orders. You can right click to get an overview, which we've looked at before. And then if you click on defend or press the space bar, it will open up their command menu. And this is everything that this commander can do in this province. So for Erkborn, he could defend. He could patrol the province. He can do a move command. He can pillage this province, which you probably don't want to do. He can become a prophet, which we'll get to. He can do magical empowerment. He can hunt for blood slaves. He could demolish the fort here and demolish the lab here. That's everything available to him. Sigbert can do most of those same things, but he can also hide within this province in stealth. Or he can hide and wait in this province. And wait is a special command that basically just means they won't bother you that he's not doing anything because he's just waiting for you to tell him what to do. Okay. So what we want to do first is send out our scout. You see that we have a very small section of the map visible to us. Everything else is covered in this fog of war. And to reveal that, we need to send commanders out to explore. So we're just going to send our scout in one direction here. And he'll kind of roam around the map for us to reveal the fog of war. So we can see where kind of our enemies are, where their capitals are, and get the general layout of terrain. So we can maybe set our sights on an objective. And maybe scout out some thrones for us to claim in order to actually win. So that's what our scout's going to do. Erkborn is... You know, he has an army, and if we, again, go to press the army setup button, we can see that he has 2 squads of units. And I guess I should break down what all these are. This screen is. So, along the top, you can see the total number of units that are in the province controlled by you, which is 26, 24 units and 2 commanders. You can see the number of supplies here, the number of supplies we're requiring every turn here. and then our siege strength of all our units here. For Urkborn, you can see that he can lead up to 3 squads without getting morale penalties. So he currently controls 2 of 3 squads. In total, he can handle up to 100 living units, and he controls 24 currently, and they are consuming 25 supplies along with the commander. And so here are the 2 squads. And we can see they're made up of 12 infantry of Ulms with battle axes, and 12 pikeneers with pikes. So you can click on any of these units, and you can move them into a different squad. You can move them back into the same squad. You can move them up here into the garrison, and they'll be in the fort or in the province, and they will not be part of our actual mobile army. You can also take any unit and click on the commander himself here on the left, and that will form a new squad with that unit. And so now we're at 3 out of 3 squads. He can't handle any more squads without taking morale penalties. So if I were to take another unit and make another squad, 4th squad, we can do it. You can have 4 squads here. But now you'll notice all of them, instead of +1 morale, they're all at +0 morale. And if we were to make a 5th squad, they'd all go down to -1 morale. But 5 is the maximum no matter what. So you can't go above that. And usually morale is kind of nice to have. You need kind of a special reason to have multiple squads, like that many squads. Usually you'd rather have a second commander then. Okay, so there's that. To the right then, you see some green boxes and then set battle orders. And this is called scripting or battle formations. And if you click on the green square, it's going to bring you to this sort of vague football-esque screen. And this represents the battlefield. And so by right-clicking, you can move around squads of units. You can move around commanders and place them on the battlefield so that this is how they're going to be presented anytime they're going into a battle. So the left side of the battlefield is going to be the exit. It's sort of the edge of the battlefield. If you route, that's where you're going to be running towards, is the left side of the battlefield. The right side here is going to be towards the enemy. And you might not always be on the left side, you might be on the right side, but everything will just be reversed. So it's equal. And so there's a lot to be said, I suppose, about what formations are good, how do you script, how are you going to present your units, what's the best way to do that? It's a lot to kind of go into, and this is just sort of a general new player thing, so I can only throw out some general tips. But obviously, the basic idea is usually you want some sort of front line, some sort of strong infantry type, generally with shields, or just heavy armor, or a lot of hit points, or something like that. Something that makes them, that they can handle hits. They can take hits and keep trucking. So you want some sort of front line, and then you want some sort of maybe back line of archers, something that can do ranged damage, or something like that. It's not really required, but it often is nice. But there are also downfalls to having a lot of archers, as we'll get into. Then you might want to have like a flanking unit, something that maybe is not as well protected, but might be capable of a lot more damage. Maybe they don't have shields, and maybe they have giant axes or something like that, or maybe they have 2, swords or something. And so they're less concerned about holding a line and more concerned about being the hammer on the anvil kind of thing. Then there's also, you might want cavalry. Maybe a much faster unit that is designed to bypass the whole line and the infantry skirmish that's going on, and they just ride past that to get to the enemy rear, where all the squishy commanders and mages are sitting and things like that. And so you might have the front line and stuff that's just kind of holding it, while the cavalry races to the back, kills all the commanders and the mages, and then the whole army routes. I mean, that's a viable strategy as well. So we don't have many units, and we didn't really go over Ulm's units in detail, because I just wanted to teach you what makes up a unit first. But if we look at our pikeneers, they have 19 protection and 12 hit points, so they're pretty defensible, even though they don't have a shield and they have low defense. Instead, what they have are these length 5 pikes. And again, based on what I said about weapon length, that means that they will repel, or they will get a repel attempt on basically every other weapon in the game. Even enemies using spears, which are length 3, these guys still have the longer weapons, so they can still poke them and try to repel them. Now, they're not super good at it, because they only have an attack value of 10. So they're probably not going to repel that much, but they have the opportunity to repel basically everything in the game. And so that's an alternative that you might want to employ depending on your unit selection. Rather than having like a really strong, solid sword and shield front line, you might just employ long spears in order to rely on repelling instead of just tanking everything. So these guys are not really DPS, although they could be. But we kind of want to take advantage of the repelling if we can. So this is more likely to be our front line. Whereas the other unit we have here is the Battle Axe Infantry. They also have 19 protection because Ulm's armor is very good. They also have no shields and only 7 defense. So they're not really good at holding a line either. But rather than length 5, they only have length 2 weapons. So they're going to be actually repelled themselves by spears or pikes. You know, anything longer than 2 will actually repel them. They can repel things like clubs and swords and maces and axes, you know, length 1 weapons. So they actually wouldn't be terrible in that position, but you'll notice that their damage is quite high. 22 slashing damage is pretty effective, especially during this era. So this is more like our hammer that's going to come in from the side, come in from the flank, and is going to be able to likely kill most things that they hit. And so they don't want to take as much damage or have as much man-on-man contact as the Pikeneers, because they're not going to repel as much. But because all of our infantry is so strong, they're also not that at risk of dying either. So that's pretty nice. So if we go in here and we want to script these things and just have these troops and nothing else, this is a relatively small amount of troops, strong as they might be. And if we look in the upper right, we can see different formation options. Depending on your commander and how good their leadership score is, if they're 75 and below, they're only going to have access to 2 of these. And that's a box formation and a skirmish formation. So these are just square formations. These are usually not ideal for most troop types you're going to script. And that's because what you generally want with your troops is surface contact. You want all of your troops to be able to hit something rather than kind of like, you know, jostling for position and trying to move past the blob and trying to get there. Like, you want to have a thin layer usually of all your troops making contact with the enemy so they all can swing their weapons every turn. So the box formation is good for certain things, as we'll look at, but usually for, like, especially a front line, you're not going to want a box because it's a very small section that's going to have a lot of guys in the back not doing anything. They'll spread out. I mean, they'll eventually make their way around, but it's not perfect. Skirmish formation is, I would say, much more rarely used, even than box formations. It basically spreads them out even more, so they have more surface area, they have more room to kind of maneuver, they take up a larger space, but the problem is skirmish formation will actually impose a morale penalty. So now these guys are at +0 morale instead of +1, because they're in a skirmish formation. There are certain units that ignore that penalty, and they're meant to be in skirmish formation, but not these guys. If you have leadership of 100 or more, though, you get access to the different line formations. And these are where you're going to be, this is kind of your bread and butter, especially as a nation like Ulm. So, if we just click line, it'll go into a line, as expected. Sparse line will be much longer, they'll be more spread apart, but much like skirmish formation, it will give you that morale penalty. Double line will double them up horizontally. So you'll have sort of 2-man abreast kind of thing. But with this amount of units, that's basically looking like a box formation. So with this amount of units, we would want probably just a regular line and leave it at that. We're not planning on going into battle with this amount of units, but this would be the formation. As for how far forward or how far back you want to put them, depends on a lot of factors, and it depends on the other, you know, squads you're going to have, the other units you're going to have, and the sort of mage situation you might have. I generally am interested like going here. I find usually this is a happy medium where usually the enemy archers can't immediately hit me. And that allows me to have time to maybe cast buffs or something like that. So this is usually where I'm at, but there is a benefit for certain nations to be much further up, maybe. And there's a certain benefit for some armies and, units and things like that where you'd go all the way to the rear. And especially against AI, this is often kind of a good strategy for certain setups, because the AI is just going to be sending all their units straight towards you right away. They don't do any buffing or holding or anything. They're just going to charge towards you. And so because all sorts of units have different movement speeds, what's going to happen across the whole battlefield is they'll actually start to spread out and stagger. And so whatever units they have that are the fastest will arrive on your side here first. Whereas if you put up here instead, you're probably going to encounter all their units kind of simultaneously. So this is actually not a bad idea, is to go as far back as possible. Right. Then the last thing is set battle orders. And if you click on this, you'll be able to give this squad specific commands of what you want them to do. Now, I should be specific that these are, this is a scripted command that will be followed for a little while. And basically, they will follow this command until it's been completed. So what I mean is, if you set them to attack, and you set the target to be the closest enemy, okay, they will immediately start moving forward to try to attack the closest enemy. And once that's completed, once that enemy has been completely killed or routed, they will then go off script. And they will do basically whatever they feel like, which generally, of course, is going to be just to keep attacking the next closest enemy. I mean, that's how most units operate. So in that case, it's really not a big deal, right? This is not a problem. But if you have them, for example, for your archers, and you have them on fire, say enemy archers, as soon as they kill all the archers, or the archers rout, they will then change their priority. They won't switch to like a different archer group. They'll probably just shoot the closest group. Again, often this is not going to be that big of a deal. And you do want to script this, because that first command, the first script you give them is very important. But just something to keep in mind. And if your units have, for example, javelins available to them, usually, there'll be certain types of units that they're meant to be like frontline infantry, but they might have a couple javelins on them. You can set them to fire at the closest enemy, and they'll walk up until they're within range. They'll throw their javelins, and then once that's no longer valid because they ran out of javelins, then they will just default to attacking the closest enemy with their melee weapons. So javelins can actually be a really strong asset on your infantry, because it's nice to just get that initial volley of javelin tosses, and then they just operate as normal infantry afterwards. Right. So the most common things you're going to be doing are going to be these first four. Or the second, attack, hold and attack, fire, hold and fire. And the hold action just means that they will hold their position for 2 rounds before they start advancing to go and attack. If they're archers and you set them on hold and fire, for example, they will fire if there is an enemy within range. They just won't start moving to fire to get within range for 2 rounds. So you can only hold units for 2 rounds. This is to prevent complete turtling on both sides. Your units will always eventually start moving towards each other. But you can either do, immediately attack, immediately start moving, or you can have them hold for 2 turns before they go. And this largely is important once you have access to mages in combat and you're casting buff spells to amplify your units. That usually means you have 2 rounds for all your mages to cast buffs. Maybe 3 rounds if they can cast it a little distance. But yeah, so for our purposes, because we're all the way in the back, and we want to wait as long as we can for the enemies to kind of stagger across the battlefield, we're going to want to set our guys on hold and attack the closest enemy. So they'll hold for 2 rounds, wait as long as possible, and then start walking towards the AI. And the AI, like I said, will never do any hold stuff. They will always start moving immediately towards you. Okay, so that's our Pikeneers all the way in the back on hold and attack closest. Then we have these guys. Now, like we said, we want these to come in from the flank. We want them to not be the focal point of attention for archers or for enemy infantry or anything like that. We want the Pikeneers to take the brunt of it, and then we come in and start slashing. And so, for that purpose, you could put these in a line. There's nothing really against that, but due to the way that they're going to be kind of folding in to be on the flank, the line formation doesn't actually matter for them too much, in my experience. So we can just leave them on a box, and it's not that big of a deal. One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at the like a flanking unit like this, and where to put them, is to look at their combat speed. Because if your flankers are much faster than your frontliners, you got to put them further back in the field. Otherwise, they'll rush in first and take the brunt of the hits. So you really need to be aware of different combat speeds. Thankfully, our guys have the same speed. They're all wearing the same heavy armor, so they're all moving at the same speed. So we can just do something like this. Pikeneers are guaranteed to take the brunt of it first, and then we'll come in and help out. Now, again, we don't really have many units, and so it's very likely that with this plan, these infantry will kind of get intercepted by a separate squad. But you know, this is the general outline, and you would just also put these on hold and attack closest. You could put them on rearmost or enemy archers, but because of their low combat speed, they would have to be just kind of spending a lot of rounds of combat slowly trudging across the map to get to the archers in the back. And so we really just want them to support our Pikeneers to handle the infantry, and then weather the storm of the archers and stuff, and keep progressing as a block. So something like that. Then for our commanders, the scout is not involved here. He's going to be off on his own, so we don't have to script him with anything. Although you can script him, because he might get caught. And if he gets caught while he's stealthing around, he will get thrown into a battle. And he cannot usually handle almost any sort of battle that he would get into. And so it might be prudent to script him, to put him on the far edge of the battlefield closest to the exit, and script him to just immediately retreat and try to run away. And so it's very unlikely that he'll die from combat with that script and that placement. Whereas if you just leave him unscripted in the middle, he might just try and attack them stupidly and die. So, yeah, just something you can do to maybe help your scouts live when they would have died. As for our commander, he can go into combat. You know, he has similar stats to our actual units, and he has a tower shield, so he could go into combat. But generally, it's not often recommended for your regular military commanders to wade into battle, because he could take a lucky hit. You know, due to the way the system works, he could take just one single shot from an arrow and die. And if all your commanders are dead, all your commanders capable of leading the units, if all of them die, the rest of your army will rout. And so that's why commanders are often targeted. Because if they all die, the battle is basically over. So we want to keep him in the back. And if we go to his orders, commanders get a little bit extra flexibility in what you can script them with. You can actually script them for 5 rounds with specific actions before going on to a general script. So for him, we want him to stay behind the troops. Because we certainly don't want him to attack, and we don't want him to retreat. So we're going to have him just stay behind the troops and stay out of the way. And to make sure that he doesn't kind of jostle in position with them, we're going to have him hold for at least 2 rounds. Because everyone else is holding 2 rounds. And then a 3rd round as well. So he's just a bit further behind. He's kind of lagging behind, and hopefully avoids any sort of archery fire or spells or something. But you can never be too sure. Now, there is something else you can do to help protect your commanders if you have units to spare. Truthfully, I often forget to do this, but it is quite valuable. And that's if you take a squad say you take 3 units and you make another squad, you can actually go over here and press Guard Commander. And you can have a squad. It doesn't take up a squad slot or anything, but you can have up to 5 units be bodyguards for your commanders. And this will protect them from certain effects, such as assassination attempts. It can help. But also, these units will not do anything but just stand around the commander on the field. They'll never move away or anything like that. They'll stand there, and if anything tries to approach, they will attack it. So you can do that to give some extra protection, especially to your squishy mages, to prevent just like one cavalry from charging up and cutting off their head. Your military commanders usually can handle some stuff, but yeah, I mean, considering it doesn't take up a squad slot, it's often a very good idea to use bodyguards if you can spare the units. Okay, so that's that. That's scripting. There's a lot more that goes into it, all sorts of different unit types and different sort of design philosophies, scripting philosophies, and also there's mage scripting, which is a whole other thing. But that's the basics of battle formations. Okay, next let's move on to recruitment. So if we press R, go into the recruitment screen of our capital, we see a wide array of commanders and units that are available to us. And it also shows our gold total right now, the resources available, recruitment points available, commander points available, and holy points available. I didn't talk about holy points. Those are spent specifically on sacred units or sacred commanders. So it's another separate currency. Doesn't accumulate. And the number available to you is based on your Dominion strength overall. So remember, our strength was 4. So we can recruit up to 4 sacred units or commanders per round. That's not really going to be a big problem for us, though, because we don't have any sacred units, and you're not going to get usually more than 1 commander in general per round. Right. So you can go through and look at all your different commanders. We have 4 different commanders of Ulm, and basically they have different armor and or different weapons. So the first 2, this one has a hammer, and he has 19 protection. The second one has a hammer, but he has 23. And that's because he's wearing the special black plate armor. So he has a higher defense, and thus a higher resource cost. 11 more resources, as you can see at the bottom. The next 2 just have a Morning Star instead of a hammer. And again, you can click on this to sort of see the differences that might make. Morning Star has +2 attack value against enemy shields. And then there's the version with black plate. Then we have the Black Lord. And so this is a cavalry commander. Still 100 leadership. Still like black plate, very high stats. But he also has a horse. We haven't really talked about cavalry at all, but every mounted unit is going to have a separate tab here for their mount, which will show pretty much all the same sort of stats you're already familiar with. And they might have armor, they might not. They might have 1 or more sort of natural attacks, like for horses. Usually they have a nice hoof attack that they'll do in combat. And the unit operates kind of as a single entity in combat, sort of, in that they will ride together, they'll move together, and they'll make their attacks sort of together. But then the rider and the horse can be targeted separately. And again, there's sort of this different, there's numbers and formulas to determine what gets hit or anything like that. And depending on the size of the riders, the size of the mount, things like that, one might be targeted more than the other. Usually in the case of normal cavalry like this, the rider is more likely to be targeted than the horse. But in this case, both of them are extremely well protected and have a large amount of hit points. So these Black Lords are quite hard to kill. And in fact, there's a certain strategy involved where you actually put magic items onto this Black Lord, and he kind of takes on some small armies by himself, perhaps. And that's called thugging, but we're not going to get into that. Okay, so as far as just a military commander is concerned, though, the Black Lord does cost a lot more than just our normal commanders, and they have the same amount of leadership. So whether or not you actually want to spring for the Black Lord, when, like I said, generally not recommended to put them into combat, that's up to you. But the Black Lord is more capable of going into combat due to also having a horse. If the horse dies for a commander, they can just get a new one as an action on their turn. So it takes 1 month and they find another horse. If the horse dies on a cavalry unit, however, the unit is essentially dead. Like you lose the unit, but you may actually, if the rider gets back home safely, you can recruit that unit again for half the cost, because you only have to pay for half the unit. He just has to get a new horse. But there's no way to get new horses while out on the field, or, out away from a fort. All right, then we have our first mage. This is the Master Smith. And we went over what these different stats mean last time, so I don't have to re-explain that. But we see that he costs 185 gold, 7 resources, and 2 commander points. So if we click on this and queue him up, our commander points are now at 1. If we click him again, we don't have enough commander points. It puts us at -1, and he's grayed out, which means we're not going to get him this round. But you can sort of pool those numbers. So he costs 2 points, and we had 1 left. So 1 point after this round will be put into him, and he'll just need 1 more the next round. So if you queue up 2 of these and put it on repeat recruitment, so that it'll keep repeating that order every round, then you're basically going to get 2 every 3 rounds. Is how that's going to work out. Because we have an odd number of commander points like that. Then we have the Black Acolyte. This is a level 1 priest. He has no magic ability, no mage ability outside of the divine stuff of being a priest. So this is useful if you just need something cheap, very cheap, to do priestly activities such as preaching or building temples. But otherwise, he is not especially useful for Ulm. The Master Mason is a special type of commander. Can't really lead many units at all, has no magic ability, priestly ability, or anything like that. But he does have a siege bonus, so he basically counts as like 30 units for sieging a castle, because he knows so much about masonry. And also on defense, he counts as 20 units for defending a castle from a siege. But the most important thing is that he is a mason, and so he can build like an extra advanced fort compared to a normal commander. So that might be useful in the long run, but not right away. Then we have the Lord Guardian. This is another military commander with 100 leadership. But a very high resource cost, and he doesn't have a horse. And what he does have, though, is a big magical black halberd. So that's what this symbol is. This is magic damage. Magic damage is not inherently better than regular damage. It doesn't do extra damage because it's magic or anything like that. And there aren't really creatures that are just vulnerable to magic that makes it do more damage. But there are a couple of effects that you're going to encounter almost probably in your first game even. They're not super common, but they're out there. And one of those is called Ethereal, and the other is called Invulnerability. And Ethereal is sort of like a ghostly trait, where if it's a non-magical attack against an ethereal creature, it has a 75% chance to just miss completely. Just completely negated. It's like the first thing that 75% chance it just misses. And so if you just have normal physical weapons, it can be very hard to hurt those things, especially if there's a lot of them. Magic damage, however, completely ignores that. All of your magic damage will hit as long as your attack actually hits. It ignores that 75%. So if you're going up against maybe a nation that has a lot of ghost units or ethereal units, and there are some that are like that, then magic damage is going to be pretty important. Most of the time, most battles, though, it's not going to mean anything. Invulnerability is similar. It basically counts as protection. It can be large amounts of protection, but it's specifically protection against non-magical attacks. So you might have a creature like a vampire or something that has 25 invulnerable. So it has protection 25 against non-magical attacks. But if you have any magical weapons, it just cuts right through it. These are, again, aren't super common. We're not going to encounter any within many turns here. And even if you do encounter them, they can still die to just normal weapons. But that's the benefit of magic damage. Also, if we click on his halberd, he has an extra effect on it, Bane of Heresy. And this will do 15 fatigue damage. So it'll cause fatigue instead of actual hit point damage to a target that it hits. And it's also armor piercing. So what that means is that you cut their protection value in half when determining damage. So that's very powerful. And that only affects gods and sacred units, so pretenders and sacred troops or commanders. And it has an area effect of 1. So it'll affect not just one unit, but an entire square of units. So very, nice effect. Very nice effect against enemy sacreds or pretender. But, it depends on how many of those you're actually going to be encountering. If you know that you're going up against an enemy nation, then they use a lot of sacred units. Stuff like this can be quite potent. Then we have the Black Priest. So it's a level 1 Earth Mage, a level 2 Priest, and it has a 10% chance for another magic path. And it's also an Inquisitor. So it's very efficient when preaching against other faiths, and we'll get to preaching in a minute. Okay. Units are all going to be kind of similar. It's basically just going to sort of, for Ulm, it's their weapon choice, whether they have a shield or not, and whether they're wearing regular plate armor or the black plate armor. There are a couple different units, though. We have a War Dog. So these obviously have very low sort of hit point stats, defense stats, things like that, low damage stat, low magic resistance. But they are size 2, so you can fit 5 of them in one square. They still have 15 protection because they're wearing mail barding. And they are kind of fast at 16 speed. Unfortunately, they are undisciplined. And that means that they cannot be given specific battle orders. They can't be told to hold an attack or anything like that. They're basically like the AI. They're just going to, wherever you put them, they're immediately going to charge forward and attack the first thing they encounter. So with that speed and everything, if you could script them like cavalry to kind of run to the back and tear up a mage or something, that would be kind of nice. But since they're undisciplined, they're just going to run in right away and probably get themselves killed with only 8 hit points and no shields or anything like that. So the War Dog is a questionable recruitment choice, as fun as it might seem to get a bunch of War Dogs. Also, we have Crossbowmen. So here's a ranged weapon. It's range 50, has an attack value of 12. So that's the precision of trying to get it to land where you want it to land. And then it does 15 piercing damage, which is quite high. Especially for this age, that is among the highest range damage you're going to see on a normal unit. And 50 range is probably the highest range you'll see. So these are really good crossbowmen. And if we click on the weapon, you see that their weapon is actually armor piercing. So it is a piercing damage, so it'll reduce their armor by 15%. But what's more, it's armor piercing, so it'll cut the armor in half. I think those combined mean that it will reduce the enemy armor by 65%. It's also going to make one shot. They'll do one attack every 3 rounds of combat. So they're not going to be firing very often. But when they do, it's going to be very impactful on anything that it hits. And they can fire 10 shots throughout the combat. So that's 30 rounds worth of crossbowmen shooting, which is quite a... it's not a super long combat, but that's usually enough time. And so these are very powerful crossbowmen. I believe they're the most powerful ones in the era. But the problem is that friendly fire exists. And so if their shots are not entirely accurate, and they don't land in the square where they should land, and they land in one of your squares, there is a good chance that one of your guys will get hit with it. Now, if those guys are wielding tower shields, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal, because it's 15 damage with 65% armor piercing, but, it's probably going to hit the shield, most likely, and it has to go through 19 protection plus 23 protection. They are separately done, so 65% of 19 is whatever, and 23 is whatever. So the tower shield guys are probably not going to get harmed, but what about, our battle axe guys? These guys that have 19 protection and no shields. 65% less armor means you're looking at 6 or 7 armor or something, protection, and it's a 15 damage shot. So on average, if they get hit, they're going to take like, I don't know, 8 points of damage or something like that on average. And that's a lot of damage to your own units. So if you're only fielding the ones that have the big tower shields, the crossbowman is not the worst choice and can really put the hurt on enemies. But it's an important thing to keep in mind. It's always calculating and looking at what your archer's damage is, the damage capability, their accuracy, versus what sort of troops you're going to have on the field in front of them that might be in the firing line, and are they going to hurt your own troops? There are obviously magic things to kind of alleviate that pain. Maybe make your crossbowmen more accurate, or increase the protection value of your troops, or even put up like magical air shields to prevent arrows from hitting them, stuff like that. But just keep all that in mind. And if we look over here, there's a sapper unit, and these are kind of designed for sieging. They get a siege bonus of 5, so each one counts basically as 5 units for sieging. But they also have crossbows. These are not as good, range 40. Attack 12 with only 11 piercing, but it's also armor piercing. They attack once every 2 rounds, so they attack more often. They have more ammunition, and this is less likely to hurt your own troops because of the 4 points less of damage. So if you do want to have some ranged units, and you're not going to have all shields, you may instead want to recruit some sappers instead of your actual super strong crossbowmen, just to prevent your own troops from dying. They are a bit more expensive in basically every aspect, so you're probably not going to get as many of these, but remember, they're going to shoot like 33% faster. Or is that 50% faster? I don't know. We also have our own Black Knights. These is our cavalry. We're probably going to try to get some of these. And the Guardian, which is like the Lord Guardian. They have the Black Halberds with the 27 magic damage. Quite expensive for what you get. I mean, they do a lot of damage. This could be a great flanking unit, but it is going to be a pricey one. But then again, all your units are going to be pretty pricey. So the Guardian's not the worst choice either. So what do we want to recruit first? Well, we definitely want a mage. We definitely want mages because we want to start getting research, and mages are going to be valuable to us for multiple reasons. So our mage of choice is going to be the priest smith, because it has a good usable magic paths. It's also a priest. It has good research ability, and it's not affected by our drain scales. And also it can forge magic items a bit better and gives us a nice resource bonus to this province. So Priest Smith basically has everything we want, and is probably going to be the only thing we actually make as far as mages. So we're just going to put one in there for right now and put them on repeat recruitment, so we just get one every turn. We do have one extra command point, so we could queue up more, but you have to pay for it right now. So if I queue that up, that gold comes out of our money right now. So we don't want to do that. As for troops, we're going to want some sort of front line. And for me, I like having shields rather than pikes. So we're going to look towards one of these infantry of Ulm. Now, we could go for the black plate, which is going to cost 11 more resources to get that nice extra black plate for that extra 4 protection. But you do lose 1 defense in the process. So I'd rather have, for now, just more units rather than some like slightly better ones, but you may feel differently. And so then the decision is, do I want a hammer or do I want the Morning Star? The hammer has bludgeoning and piercing damage at 18, whereas the Morning Star has bludgeoning piercing at 17, but it's +2 versus shield. But you'll notice that the Morning Star has 10 defense because it has an extra defense penalty. but it has 1 higher attack. This is my front line that's mostly going to be just holding the line, so I'm actually okay with getting the higher defense. So we're going to go with the hammers. And it's length 1, so we're not going to be really repelling anything except for maybe bite attacks. But our strength is in the shield and the protection values and stuff, rather than any repelling, which would be the pikeneer's strength. So we can queue up, you know, as many of these as we can, and you'll see our resources number keeps going down. And so we don't have enough resources. We have a lot more gold and a lot more recruitment points to spend, but we're short on resources right now. You can queue up more. You can keep queuing this up, and you'll be in the hole for resources. But much like the commanders, this will kind of keep applying down the line until eventually you recruit all these. But we don't need to spend our money on that for the moment, because it's, you know, it's unnecessary. We'll keep an eye on this. So we're just going to go with these for the moment. We could invest in some other stuff. Alternatively, we could get more battle axe guys, or get like the big flail guys, or even get some cavalry. But right now, I just want kind of a larger quantity of units. So we're going to stick with that for the moment. Okay. Next is the... I want to talk about the profit thing, because that's going to be one more thing we do. So I need to talk about Dominion and how it spreads. You'll see that on the map here, there's this sort of yellow outline all around our capital province. That represents where our current Dominion is. And next turn, most likely, this is going to spread out, and so one other province will also be surrounded by this yellow glow. And over time, it'll continue to spread and spread and spread. And that's good for you. You generally want to be within your own dominion, because there's numerous effects that are in place if you are within your own dominion, especially if you're fighting battles within your own dominion. You will actually get some nice bonuses to your troops. I believe you get +1 morale for all your troops if you're fighting in your own dominion, and if you're fighting in enemy dominion, there's -1 morale. So depending on where a battle takes place, it could swing the tide of the whole battle, because one side will have +1 maybe, and then the other side has -1, and that's kind of a significant difference. So spreading your dominion as far and wide as you can is often a very nice thing, and especially if you have high-end scales. You know, you've got really good order and productivity and stuff like that. You want all the provinces you control to be within your good scales to get the most out of them, whereas some nations are going to have really terrible ones that you don't want to be in. So how Dominion spreads is largely through temples. And you'll notice that we do have a temple in our starting capital. And so you can build temples in any province you control. A priest can travel there and spend usually 600 gold to build a temple. It takes 1 round to do so. At the end of every round, every temple will perform what's called a temple check. And how the temple check works is this kind of complicated formula. Not that complicated, but basically a temple will first check its current province that it's in, and it will check the Dominion strength there. And if it's positive, if it's your own Dominion, it has a chance to increase the strength of that Dominion there up to your max strength. So there's a chance to increase it up to our 4, or +1 up to a maximum of 4. There's only a percentage chance of that occurring, though. And if that doesn't happen, then it will go to like a secondary check, where it will travel to a different province, a different neighboring province at random. And then it'll check there. And it basically goes down this list of checking, is this our Dominion? Can it be strengthened? And then it makes a dice roll to see if it strengthens that. Or is there no Dominion there? In which case it'll just add one of your Dominion for free. You know, or is it an enemy Dominion? And then there's like this sort of clash or a conflict, a Dominion conflict they call it, where you have a chance to lower the enemy's Dominion by 1. But ignoring all the specifics of it, basically, the more temples you have, the faster your dominion is going to spread. The less temples you have, the more likely it is for the enemies to kind of take over your dominion, take over control of dominion in different provinces near you. So you're sort of fighting two wars throughout a game of dominions. You're fighting the physical war of taking over provinces with armies and mages and all that sort of stuff, and you're taking over capitals and thrones. But then you're also fighting this sort of religious war of dominion, because you want your own dominion to spread, and what dominion is the belief among the people of your god. And so you want the whole world to believe in your god, because it's going to be the one true god, most, hopefully. So you're spreading your dominion, and if you neglect it, and you don't build temples, or things, bad things happen to you, and so on and so forth, and you lose all your dominion, even in your capital, you have no dominion anywhere, you lose. You are killed. Because your god just, vanishes because no one believes him in him anymore. That's called a dom kill. It's pretty rare to happen in a normal game like this. And in fact, I would probably say, with the knowledge that I have now imparted upon you, you will probably not ever be dom killed in an average game against AI. It just isn't going to happen, most likely. The AI, especially on higher difficulties, does get a lot of money, and they do tend to build temples everywhere, but it just takes a lot of time and effort to actually wear down a nation all the way. And by that point, you probably have already lost sort of the physical war as well. So you already have your capital like surrounded, and all your temples have been razed to the ground and stuff. So it's not something you super have to worry about, but the more important thing is that you generally want to have dominion where you have your provinces, and you want to fight in your own dominion and stuff like that. So temples are big for that, but there's also other things that spread dominion. And one of those is your pretender god. Once he is out on the field, out on the map, he will basically act as his own moving temple or immobile temple, whatever. He'll act as an extra temple. And there's also a prophet. And you can designate any commander under your control as your prophet. You can only have one prophet at a time. If he dies, it takes 6 turns or so before you can appoint a new prophet. And when you appoint them as your prophet, they will immediately become a level 3 priest. Unless they're already at least a level 3 priest, in which case they'll get +1. So they might become a level 4 priest. But for Ulm, for sure, we're just going to get a level 3 priest out of it, which is pretty nice, because there is certain higher end divine magic they can cast. And then they will also act as like basically a moving temple. So that's, you always want to have a prophet, pretty much. And a very common, easy strategy that will work for most nations is to just, whatever your first turn military commander is, you can just turn him into your prophet by doing that command. And so it takes 1 round, but like I said, you don't want to advance out into the world on your first round anyways, so he's not doing anything else. You can just make him your prophet, and then you have one. And he'll be, leading into battle, and he's your prophet, and it all works out. I've heard alternative strategies of making your first scout into a prophet, because he can move around the map and basically just be a really stealthy moving temple. But I generally like to have my prophet go into battle with me to use the high-end divine magic. Now, if your nation does have level 3 priests available to recruit, which is not super common, you may want to wait until you could afford to buy one of those and then make them your prophet in order to get like a level 4 priest. But generally, the time that it takes, the money that's going to cost to get that out in the early game is not usually worth the difference, and the time that you'll not be spreading dominion in the first few turns or something like that, and not having a prophet available to you. That's going to be up for you to decide, but just know that there's really nothing almost ever wrong with just making one of your first commanders into your prophet. Okay, so that's dominion, that's prophets, that's temples. Bottom line, if you can afford them, make temples in every province you control. However, if an enemy takes over the province, your temple will be immediately razed to the ground. And they are not cheap at 600 gold. So building temples in sort of questionable provinces that are kind of like you might be worried about losing soon to an enemy army, you probably don't want to build temples there if you're worried about the cash, because it is very easy sometimes for them to just get destroyed, and there goes all your money. Okay. That's basically it for our first turn as far as everything we're going to do. The last hotkey I want to mention is the N button. And what this will do is we'll just highlight for you any commanders that are not given an order. So if we go here and say we put him on defend, so he's not doing anything, because defend is basically like the default command of not doing anything whatsoever. And in fact, if we leave him on defend and we press end turn, it will actually warn us that he's not doing anything, because defend is like nothing. Like nothing will happen from defending. If you want a unit to usually stay on a province and like just be on alert, then you might want to put him just instead on patrol. But so say we have him on defend and we're wondering, okay, what else can I do for my turn? If you press N, it will then jump to him and highlight him and say, hey, this guy's not doing anything. You should give him something to do. So that's the last hotkey that's going to be quite useful to you. Okay. Then we are now going to end our turn and it will process everything. Okay, so we see that there's been multiple proclamations, including one from Ulm. These are all prophets announcements. So it's just telling you that, Urkborn, the commander of Ulm, shall hereby be known as the prophet of Lysandros. So that's the 4 other nations have declared prophets on their first turn. It's a pretty common thing to do. Also, we have a message, this is fun, that Rhetoric the Hero has appeared at the gates of our citadel and wants to fight for our cause. So this is a random hero that we can get. Every nation has their own unique heroes available to them, and these are usually, it's sort of based on your luck scales. So if you have really low misfortune or high misfortune, you're much less likely to get these unique heroes available to you. Whereas if you have high luck, they're going to be more common. There's only so many, and if they die, they're gone forever. But yeah, so we got a free hero, Rhetoric, who we can see is pretty good. He's like a Black Lord. He's got 23 protection, 100 leadership. He also has recuperation, which means that if he gets any sort of like afflictions, like if he loses an eye or has a chest wound, that will actually heal over time. And instead of riding a horse, he actually rides a unicorn. So it has a magical horn attack that it can do. Yeah. So Rhetoric is pretty good, and actually would be a pretty viable option for turning into what I called a thug, where he could lead just go by himself or probably lead just a small squad of Black Knights with him. And he could do quite a bit of work. Probably not just as is, although maybe. But especially with some little gear, he could really do some work. Okay. So now we see a lot more information about the provinces surrounding us. We see that all these provinces connected to Ulm have units on them. These are independent armies. So these are just NPC armies that have to be cleared out in order to take over the province. So these are only going to be there usually just once. And once the province is taken by us, then we have, province defense. And so any enemy that wanted to take over that from us then has to go against the province defense and any armies we might have sitting there. All right. And so if you hover over it, you're going to see that, say, this province contains about 60 enemy units. The army consists of mainly militias, archers, and heavy infantries. Now, it's an important thing to really keep in mind here. This is an estimate. This is just an estimate. You do not usually get to know the exact number of units that are in there. That goes for independence, and that goes for enemy nations and everything. So it contains about 60. And the actual number that's there can vary based on... So what you see can vary to be up to 50% below the actual number and up to 200% higher. So say there is actually 60 there, which is probably not that far off. There's actually 60 there, that could show on my screen at any given time to be as low as 30 or as many as 120. So just because you see 60, just keep in mind that there could be 120. Theoretically, this could be the 50% number. There could be up to 240 there. Now, that's extremely unlikely, and as you play the game more and more and more, you'll kind of get a feel of what's more or less likely to actually be there. But yes, you are almost never going to see the exact correct number. Now, here's the exception. Because Sigbert is a spy, he gets additional information about provinces where he's hiding. And so we can actually see then that this 110 number that's here is probably accurate. Probably is pretty close to accurate. So 110 Wolf Tribe archers and Wolf Tribe warriors, and commanded by a Wolf Tribe shaman. So he's got pretty full information on basically every aspect of Anoria because he's in there. Not every nation gets spies. In fact, most don't. So having a spy can be pretty handy for that purpose. So anyways, 60 militia, archer, heavy infantry. Whichever type of unit is listed first is going to be the most plentiful unit that's there. So this is mainly militia, but there are also some archers and a handful of heavy infantry. This one is 30 militia, heavy cavalry, and light cavalry. This is 40 Bear Tribe warriors. And this is 210 Lion Tribe warriors and Lion Tribe archers. So, it's another thing you're just going to kind of have to figure out as you go to get the feel of things. Because one thing you can't do in-game is actually look at these units' stats. You can't look at, say, the heavy cavalry and know what its stats are. But there is a site that you're probably going to end up bookmarking before long, and that is the Dominion 6 Mod Inspector. Now, even though it's called a Mod Inspector, it's most often used for not mods, because it contains details on every unit, spell, item, magic site, all that's in the game. So if you load that up, you can then go to like the unit tab and type in heavy cavalry or Wolf Tribe archer or Lion Tribe warrior or whatever, and you can see the exact stats that those units are going to have. But again, if you just play for a bit, you will get kind of an idea. And most of these are kind of not strong units. Militias are very average, like 10 and everything kind of units. A lot of these like tribal warriors are not going to be super strong in any, they're not going to have armor. They might have shields. They might have bow and arrows. They might have javelins, stuff like that. Most of these are pretty weak units. The only exception that's around here are the heavy infantry and the heavy cavalry. Heavy infantry are going to be armored. I don't remember their exact protection values. I could look it up real quick. So yeah, they're gonna have about 14 protection, 15 protection or so, which is, certainly more significant than 10. And they're gonna have broadswords that are gonna swing for like 16 damage. So heavy infantry, depending on your units, could really be a bit of a trouble. But the most painful thing here is by far the heavy cavalry. They're going to have quite a bit of protection. They're going to be mounted. So there's like a couple things you're going to have to chew through to actually kill. And the real danger is their lances. Because cavalry often get lance as a weapon. It can only be used once per battle, usually. And then it's broken, and then they have to bring out like their sword or their Morning Star or something. But they will get a big damage bonus on that one attack that they get with the lance. And so whatever they hit, whatever that heavy cavalry charges into, is going to be hit very significantly usually. And so one strategy that some people employ is utilizing chaff, or what they call lance catchers. They're basically dirt cheap units that you throw out in front when you know you're facing heavy cavalry, and they're designed to just get hit with the lance, and then it's broken and they die, and then your actual more expensive units can then move in and finish the job. Ulm doesn't really have much in the way of lance catchers outside of our dogs, and I can't bring myself to do that. So heavy cavalry is kind of tricky, but again, Ulm infantry is very strong, so not much of this is actually going to be a threat for us. Additionally, we can see some information on various provinces. So we can see information on this one because we have a spy there. And we can see information on this one because our dominion spread here. So we can see that its population of about 6,400, has 64 income right now, 27 resources, 77 recruitment points. This one, however, almost 15,000 population, 148 income, 51 resources. So this one, much more valuable, and that's why there's a lot more units there. So, but we don't have that many units right now, so we probably want a relatively easy fight. So it's probably going to be this. We can face any of these, and you can see the connections. The yellow dotted line means that we can march an army directly there. There's not going to be anything stopping us. But you'll notice, it's kind of hidden here, but there's a little bit of a blue, and that represents the river. So unless your army has, like, flying, or they have swimming, or some other effect that allows them to just easily traverse rivers, you're not going to be able to just march across that. Now, during winter, or basically anytime there's a cold scale on both sides of a river, it becomes frozen. And if we waited long enough, we have cold scale. We took cold 1. So eventually this might get frozen over, although we are heading into summer, so probably not. But yeah, this is not directly connected easily, but it is connected to our capital, and that does matter, because I didn't really talk about how resources are generated. This is an important thing. So every province generates a certain amount of resources. But what a fort does, what any sort of fortification does, is it actually pulls in a certain percentage of resources from every connected province that you control. And that percentage is based on it's the administration number of your fortification there. So this is 60%. And that means that if we controlled this province, this one, this one, this one, this one, it would pull in 60% of the resources generated from each of these provinces every round. So right now, if we controlled this right now, we would pull in 60% of 27. And that would come here to Ulm and add to this number. And so that's why it's very important, especially at the start of a game, to clear out what they call the cap circle. That's every province that you can that's connected to your capital in order to give you the most income and the most resources in your capital. You can build fortifications basically in every province you control, but they're expensive, and due to the way that a fort kind of pulls in resources like that, you usually don't want to build one in everywhere if you're actually trying to recruit units in each of those. Because your other provinces are not going to be nearly as capable of recruiting units as your capital. So they kind of need to pull in as many resources as they can in order to build units, especially for Ulm. Additionally, the other thing fortifications do is amplify the income and recruitment points by that administration bonus. And so it's again why our capital is so good, because it's 60 administration is very high. I believe like a palisade that you build is like 15 or something. So right, so we're gonna try to take on Pavonia and clear this out so we can get some more resources. And we're gonna pick this specifically because it's within our dominion. So we recruited units. We've got 6 more of these infantry of Ulm. So we're going to select them. You can select them one by one, or you can double click. That will select all units of that type. And you can also, unselect certain ones. You can alt click, and that will also select all of them. Or you can select one and then do like a shift click to select everything in between those. We're going to put those with the pikeneers. They do have a lower speed, so they will kind of fall behind. And so we could, I guess, put a separate line somewhat in front of them, and they'll maybe equal out in time. You know, things like that. Checking the combat speed of all your units and seeing how they're going to move in combat is a factor. And now that we see that Urkborn is a prophet, he's a level 3 priest now. He has the prophet trait. So he gets increased attack and defense skill, in addition to the Dominion-related bonuses of our god. He can never be charmed or enslaved into serving the enemy. And he gets reinvigoration 5. Because he is permanently blessed as long as he is within our dominion, much like our pretender god. So he will always have this reinvigoration 5. He'll have the penetration bonus, he'll have the heroism bonus, stuff like that. Okay, so we can change now. If we go into the scripting, we can actually see that he can cast spells because he has access to divine spells. And so if you click on this, it'll show you all the divine spells available. You don't have to research divine spells. They're always available to you, but they are heavily dependent on the level of the priest casting them. And that's the number of symbols of these candelabra to the left. So he's level 3. He can cast up to this stuff, Word of Power and Divine Blessing. If you had a level 4, they could cast Fanaticism. And I've never seen it in my 400 hours. But if you had level 5, you could cast Divine Channeling. There is some ways you can get 5 somewhat more commonly, but I'm not going to get into that. So, you can right-click on any of these spells to get a description of what they do. Obviously, for most priests and most armies, Blessing is going to be a very valuable thing. You know, it's got a somewhat short range, area effect 5+, and it doesn't cost you any fatigue, and this will bless a certain amount of sacred units to receive your blessing, even if you're not within your dominion. And the 5+ is important because this area of effect is increased by 5 for every extra level you have. So a level 2 priest would actually affect 10 squares instead of 5. But for a level 3 priest, they get access to Divine Blessing, which is very valuable, because this will affect every single sacred unit you have with one spell cast and bless all of them at once. So that's why level 3 priests and your prophet are very valuable, especially if you have a lot of sacred units. But you only have one prophet, and so a lot of our nations might have multiple armies, and they might have multiple sacred units spread around the place, and so you still need some priests to just cast normal blessing on them. The other stuff, there's various things that are effective versus demons or undead or something. The level 3 priest is always going to have access to a special smite ability. So it varies depending on your pretender god and what magic paths they took. But we get Word of Power, which is going to affect one person at range up to 100 for 10 armor negating magic damage that can be negated by magic resistance, and will also cause a paralyzation effect that can also be negated. It's not super impactful for like going up against armies or anything like that, but it can be, you can definitely score some extra kills just due to this and due to your priest spamming this over and over, because it doesn't cost any fatigue. So Divine Blessing is big. Your smite thing can be big. But also then, as long as you're a level 2 priest, you can cast Sermon of Courage, which is going to affect a large area of units with a +1 morale bonus. And morale is pretty useful. So we're going to have our guy. We don't have any buffs, but we're going to have our guy. We don't, just cast 2 Sermon of Courage to try to put that on all our troops to have +1 morale. And then we're just going to have him cast Word of Power. And if you press X, it will actually repeat the last script thing you did again and again. So we're just going to have him cast Word of Power a few times. And we're going to put him, instead of staying behind troops, he can actually go on cast spells. You can put him on advance and cast spells, so he'll try to move to the front to continue to cast. But we'll just leave him on cast, because I don't really want him that far up. He's our prophet now, so he's pretty important to us. Okay. So with that in mind, we can now take this guy and left click, and you'll get a red arrow indicating that he's moving to this next province. If he was stealth, like our spy, it would be white. to indicate that he's not, he's hiding, so he's not attacking or anything like that. You can order a stealth unit to just actually attack, and then it'll be red. But we want to hide and stealth. Okay, so he's moving to attack. Now we could send in our newly appointed mage, Anselm, who is already assigned to research automatically. We could send him in, but we don't really know that many spells. So, you know, your mages early game are most likely just going to be doing research to try to get the spells rather than going into combat where they can't do a whole lot. So for now, he's just going to be on research. And then Rhetoric, I could send him in. Chances are he wouldn't die on a fight like this. So I suppose we can start getting him XP, and just to see how it goes. So if we want to, this is a good time to show another tip. So we'll move him in as well. And now if we click on this, and you can move in units and commanders from all sorts of different spots to the same province, and they'll all join in one battle together. And to help coordinate that, if you click on the province and press Y, it will show you all the commanders that are going to be moving to that province this turn, which can really help you keep things organized if you're moving from multiple directions at once or something. And so we can script Rhetoric, and we'll have him all the way down in the corner. And we're going to head and set him on hold, say, 3 times. Because we don't want him to really get caught before the rest of the troops move up. We don't want him to get swamped. So we're going to have him hold 3 times and then attack the rearmost. And that'll try to attack, you know, the commanders or whatever is all the way in the back. And we could do another hold to keep him even a bit safer, but we'll leave it on that. I think that'll probably be okay. He's all the way in the corner, off to the side. He should be fine. We'll see. If he dies, I'm not really going to cry about it, but I think he'll be okay. Okay, so those 2 are moving there. We can now glance back at this. We see that we could recruit, say, another infantry. Yep. So now we're getting 8 this turn. Good. And we can now look at the research menu because we have a mage doing research. He is going to contribute 11 points this month. So we're a ways off from getting any amount of research. Any sort of levels done. But we have to figure out what we want to research. And if you right click on any of these, you can look at the large lists of spells. And it's going to take you a while to actually learn all the breadth of the spell system in this game. Trust me, it's going to take a long time. But there are certain things that you're going to kind of be aware of, and you're going to learn relatively quickly as being kind of constants. You know, there's going to be certain spells that are the most prominent, that are useful to a large number of nations, and you're going to kind of keep going for over and over with different nations. The different schools, you have Conjuration. This mostly has to do with summoning creatures, both in combat and out of combat. You can summon units, so you might be able to summon a pack of sea lions, and this will summon 16 or more sea lions, and then you can put them into armies like a unit. You know, they're a unit, and lead them into battle. Whereas other stuff, like summon lesser earth elemental, this is a combat spell, so you cast this in combat, it'll summon an earth elemental, and it'll just move forward and attack stuff. So the way that you tell this apart is this little pentagram symbol. If it has that, it's known as a ritual. You cast this outside of combat at a lab, and it takes 1 turn and 1 mage doing the action for a turn. Anything without the pentagram is a combat spell. The symbols on the left determine what paths are required and how many levels. So cave cows is 2 water and 2 earth. And then the one on the right, that is the gem cost, which is always going to be... There's always going to be a gem cost for rituals. And then certain combat spells will also require gems. Usually, you know, the higher end stuff or the summon stuff will usually require gems, so you can't just spam it over and over. So we haven't gotten to gems. We'll get those in a second. but that's the different type of gems. So this one is 20 death gems. This is 1 astral pearl, cave crabs, 4 earth gems, things like that. Okay, so there are certain other things in Conjuration. I'll come back to this in a minute, but that's mostly summons. Alteration is going to be it's going to be a lot of buffs, so a lot of things that enhance units or debuff enemy units, things like that. Anything that sort of alters physical states and stuff like that. There are spells that cause darkness, or spells that cause, you know, like Curse of Stones causes all the enemies' combat speed to be reduced, and they take extra fatigue for every time they move. Or there might be stuff that makes your units all resistant to cold. Or there's certain rituals, like you can summon a giant mother oak in one of your provinces that generates 10 nature gems every month. So there's a lot of buff stuff in here, debuffs, but then there are certain combat spells, like boil, you know, like I don't know why exactly this is an alteration spell. I guess because you're altering the water. The blizzard, you're altering the air, you know, things like that. But yeah. We will be utilizing this a little bit. I'm not sure how much we'll actually go into alteration. Evocation. This is going to be all your damaging stuff, mostly. This is going to be your fireballs, your cold bolts, your shock waves and lightning bolts and flares. You know, most of your just damage spells are going to be in evocation. This is a good time to point out anyone that is in blue text instead of white or gray. The blue text means that it's a national spell. So it's a special spell that is not available to most nations, or perhaps even any nation but yours. So for evocation here, we have Iron Darts. This is a spell unique to Ulm, because it requires 1 earth and 1 holy. So our priest smiths can cast Iron Darts, and it's a really good evocation spell, especially for how low level it is and how cheap it is to spam. It can hurt our own units, but it does double damage versus any magical creatures, so we can really tear those apart. And we also have an upgraded version at level 6, the Iron Blizzard. So blue spells, they're not necessarily just straight up better than everything else, but they are often pretty good and unique to your nation, or somewhat unique. Construction. So this is going to be somewhat combined with like conjuration, where you can create certain units like through rituals. So you can make like clockwork soldiers with earth gems, or you can make like wooden lumber constructs with nature and stuff. And it's also going to have certain buffs, like, well, it has one very important one for us that we like, and that's like Soldiers of Steel. This is going to increase the protection value on all our armor in combat, which makes us win even more. But then, most notably, construction is used for the construction of magic items. So you have to research down this path if you want to make magic items. And we do, of course. So at certain levels, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, you get another tier of magic items. So if you go into and you click on this, you'll see that all the lesser magic items that you can create, the helmets, the armor, the boots, the miscellaneous items, the two-handed swords, and you can look at all these by, you know, right-clicking on any of them. And so magic items are specifically wielded by commanders, not units. And so you can make, say, a Mace of Eruption. And you can make this and then equip this on like my Raderick, the hero. I could equip this on him, and that would replace like his Morning Star or whatever he has with a Mace of Eruption, which is pretty nice because this is a magic weapon that does an extra like area of effect fire armor piercing damage on top of it. So magic items are often going to be better than what they have currently equipped. And so you can spend a lot of gems, because all of these cost magic gems. And you can spend a lot of gems to kit out one of your commanders, like, to the 9, you know? You, like, really just deck them out with a magical shield, a magical weapon, magical helmet, magical armor, you know, all this sort of stuff. I'm not going to go over all this. You can look at all these on your own time, and hopefully at this point you have a decent understanding of what all these things might do. Like the cat charm here, nature magic level 2 to make, costs 10 nature gems, and it increases your defense skill by +4, your beauty by +1, which is only for seduction, which most commanders don't have access to. And this also affects your mount too. So if we really wanted to supercharge Radoric's defense, this could be an option, but it requires a level 2 nature mage at least, and we don't really have that available to us. So, you know, the things that our mages are going to make are all going to be earth and fire stuff. So he could instead get like a burning pearl, which is going to increase his fire resistance by 5, +4 on his attack skill, and then -1 assassin patience, which is only applicable to assassins. But still, +4 attack is always kind of nice. And so you make a burning pearl, and you make a mace of eruption for him, and suddenly he's doing a lot better. Stuff like that. There's so many magic items. There's a lot to go over. I can't really go into all that in this video. And there's plenty of other videos talking about magic items and thugging and all that if you want to learn more about it. But yeah. Okay. Enchantment is going to be similar to alteration. It's going to be a lot of buffs and debuffs and things like that. This is largely the buff category, but there's buffs kind of in a lot of the different schools of magic. So it's not that clearly delineated. But this has stuff like Gift of Giant Strength, which will affect a group of units with +4 strength. And that's pretty nice as well. Because, you know, we have a lot of earth magic, so we can give our troops more protection, and we can then use this to give them more strength so they hit harder, and they just become better at everything they do, you know, just killing. But there's a lot of different stuff. I mean, you can give troops regeneration, so they heal. If they take damage, they heal over time. You can give far flight to your archers, so they shoot 50% farther on their bows. You can use envenom arrows on your archers to give their bows poison damage. You can use True Shot Warriors. This gives a 20+ squares worth of units, +4 precision, so they're much more accurate. You know, there's so many different spells, so many different buffs. And a lot of it is going to depend on the mages you have available to your nation. But there's often ways to get different types of mages in your nation. They can allow you to do different things. So yeah. Thaumaturgy, this is going to be a lot of astral stuff, but there is other things in here. But like, say you have one of these immobile pretenders and you want to teleport, you're going to want at some point, you know, further on to get level 4 thaumaturgy, because that allows you to use teleport as long as they have level 3 astral magic. So there's some buffs in here. Another thing is like Furious Warriors as a buff. This will affect a group of units with +2 attack skill and +2 morale. So that's pretty handy as well, as long as you have 2 fire. So there's loads of different buffs. And you know, eventually in the later game, armies just have a whole, you know, little army of mages that are all there at the start, just casting buffs left and right to make the troops into like unstoppable killing machines. And so on and so forth. And then lastly, blood magic. And you can completely ignore this. I know it might sound really cool, but it is quite complicated. You have to go around and hunt for blood slaves, which usually increases your unrest by a large amount. And it's really tough to handle that and balance that while maintaining like your income and resources, and then also spending blood slaves. It can be quite powerful. But really, I mean, just trust me and save it for later. Okay, so we want construction, of course, because we want to start making magic items. We're really good at it. And we also want like soldiers of steel and stuff like that. But there's also another one that's very important to our mages. And that's going to be in conjuration. And it's called Summon Earth Power. It's right here. It requires level 2 earth. And this is going to affect the mage only, the caster. And it's going to give him +1 Earth Magic for the remainder of the battle. So if it's a level 2 mage, he'll be at a level 3 Earth Mage instead for the rest of the battle. And give him +4 Reinvigoration. And we already talked about that last time as being really nice for mages. So this is going to give us even more ability to just spam spells. And this is especially true because we can see here that casting this costs 20 fatigue, but it has a little minus next to it. And what that means is you actually get a discount on the fatigue cost of a spell if you are higher level than what it requires. So if you are a level 3 Earth Mage casting a level 2 Earth Mage spell, you actually cut the fatigue cost in half. And then it goes even further than that if you're like 2 higher or 3 higher. And so once we're level 3 Earth, casting a 20 fatigue spell will only cost us 10 fatigue. And with the blessing and with this, with getting back 10 fatigue every turn, we can spam like a 20 fatigue spell over and over and over without ever stopping, which is really valuable. So Summon Earth Power is going to give us access to higher level Earth spells and is going to give us even more reinvigoration and lower fatigue costs. So that's a really important one as well. We don't need it immediately because we don't have any other, we don't have any Earth spells to cast really. But I would say we want Construction 4 and then Conjuration 3 to get Summon Earth Power. And then after that, we probably want the Iron Darts spell at level 3 Evocation. So we can only queue up that, but that's going to be our research queue. And that'll just keep plugging along. We're going to keep making mages. They'll keep doing research. And eventually we'll unlock all these different spells. Okay. That's basically it. We have our research done. And so, when we press N, we see there's no other commands to give for commanders. We have our recruitment all tallied up. We make sure our units are everything's set. And so now we're going to hit end turn and the battle will occur. Okay. So we see then here there was a battle in Pavonia. And if we click on this message that there was a battle in Pavonia, we will get a stat screen showing everything that was involved in the battle, how many kills we got, how many units we lost, how many units they lost, all that sort of stuff. But we're going to keep it in suspense, and we're going to actually just click on View Battle, and that'll zoom in and show us the battle as it plays out. So we see our units here. They're all holding for 2 rounds. Our commander here is casting Sermon of Courage twice. So he's throwing this out here as a buff. So now they're going to have +1 morale. Click on that. A magic bonus +1. They also get the friendly Dominion bonus of +1. And the squad bonus of +1. So they have a current morale of 13 compared to 10. Alright, and now the 2 rounds are up. He's going to cast Word of Power. And the troops are going to start marching forward. Over here we see the enemy army, which is a lot bigger than ours, but a lot worse. Finally, this guy is going to be moving. He held for 3 rounds, and now he's going to start charging forward, and he's very fast, as you can see. And this enemy militia is going to try to intercept him, but they were a little too slow. So now they're going to stupidly chase after him. Well, the rest of our army has made contact with the heavy infantry here. And if you right-click on anything on the field, you can see their stats. So here's the heavy infantry with 14 protection, 13 defense. They got 16 damage, and they have shields and all that. But our troops are just a lot better. And then now Raderick ran here to the back. And if you click on these guys, right here, these are the commanders, right here out in the open. And he is going to be attacking these 2. If he manages to kill both of them, the entire army will then rout. Okay, so he just killed 2 archers. I assume his horse killed 1 and he killed another. He's now getting surrounded by the militia, which could be very bad for him. There's no guarantee that he's actually going to hit the commanders, but if we right-click on him and you press V on your keyboard, you can actually look at every dice roll that he's been involved in. So you can see he hit the commander on the shield and the body with his lance for 10 points of damage. You see the attack roll, which is an 18 versus defense roll of 20. I'm not sure why the attack went through. Right, because of the shield. Yes. So he rolled above his parry value, but not above his defense value. So he hit the shield. Hit the charge bonus, because it was a lance, like I said, he did an extra 12 points. So his damage roll was 33. And then he did kind of a somewhat below average roll of 6 on the 2d6 roll. But the commander also did below average of 5. And so 33 plus 6 minus 24 plus 5, 10 points of damage. So his protection roll is 24. That's his shield plus his armor, presumably minus the piercing 15% thing. And so he took a total of 10 points of damage, which wasn't quite enough to kill him. He also hit an archer in the head with a Morning Star for 14 points of damage. He rolled in a 29 on his attack roll versus the defense roll of 11. And then he rolled a damage roll of 21 because it was a headshot. So it was 25% higher for a total of 14, which is more than enough to kill that poor archer. Then we see a bunch of attacks that were made against against Raderick. And you can see his really high defense. It's kind of tough for these guys to actually connect with him. And even if they do, as what happened right here, Militia hit him on the shield and arm. So it went to his shield. His shield plus armor is 39. So it's very, very, very difficult for the Militia to hit him right now. So basically nothing. But you see, the hero tried to attack a Militia with the Morning Star, and he actually was repelled by the Militia. So the Militia rolled a repel value of 24 with his spear, which is pretty high, versus our guy's defense of 12. But then a lot more hits went through for no points of damage, because this is the benefit of massive protection. And it's not that they couldn't go through. You know, any one of these could have, like, killed me. If they rolled just insanely high on their damage rolls. It could happen. So that's why you always want to be a little wary of being surrounded, even with like a super strong dude. But on average, I mean, it's going to be tough. Now, I will point out something. You see that his defense skill right now is at 7. And if you click on that, you can see all the modifiers. And the big thing here is the harassed penalty. Basically, every time that you are attacked, even if it was a miss, the harassment penalty is going to go up. And so when you get surrounded, it's very quickly your defense skill will plummet until you're like no longer being attacked constantly, and then it'll quickly go back up. The penalty will go down again. But yeah, if you're surrounded for a while, your defense will basically be at 0, because this harassment penalty can go down to like minus 15 or higher or something. Like it gets really low. And he also is suffering fatigue because he's swinging weapons. And so that lowers his defense as well, although I don't think that's represented here. And that's going to be lowering his attack as well. So getting surrounded for an extended fight is very dangerous to basically anything. Outside of some very strong thug units or something like that. Okay. But the rest of the army is now here to help. They dealt with the heavy infantry. These guys have routed, so their morale has failed for one reason or another. Probably because they suffered a significant losses overall. The archers have now routed. We're going to chase them off the side of the map, try to get a few more kills. And we have won the day. And that was our first battle. So, I mean, Raderick, definitely did some stuff. We'll see exactly how many kills he ended up getting. But if you look, he took no damage whatsoever. And his unicorn took no damage whatsoever. So, even though it was just one of him rushing back to the rear by himself, he did just fine. He's still getting kills because he can just keep chasing after him. And that's that. Okay. You can also change some settings, so you can show like colored squares to show which units belong to which nation. This will also show you damage dots if they've taken any damage. You can see the whole grid. You can see how many rounds have gone by. And you can also expand the battle log in the upper left to be much more detailed, to include like individual roles and stuff like that. But I find it easier just to look at a specific unit I want and press V. Okay, so let's look at the actual results. So we didn't suffer a single death. So that's what this little cross symbol is. So the commanders, 3 out of 3 died. The archers, 8 out of 19 died. Heavy infantry, 9 out of 9 died. And the militia, 16 out of 24 died. So a total of 36 of them out of 55 died. Now, that doesn't really matter because any that are still alive at the end are basically dead because it's an independent force. So they don't go anywhere or anything. They all die. As for our side, you can see we didn't suffer a single death. Our pikeneers got 7 kills. Our infantry got 13 kills. That's both the tower shield guys and the battle axe guys. They're both called infantries of Ulm, so they're lumped together. Raderick, by himself, got 9 of those kills. And our prophet got 6 by casting that word of power. So that was a flawless victory. No losses of any kind. And but it was a relatively easy independent army. You know, that's why I picked it, because it was a pretty easy one. Okay, we also see we have a new famous hero. So because Raderick earned a bunch of XP, he is now on the Hall of Fame list. And so if we go up here to the Hall of Fame, there's Raderick. He's gotten 4 kills. He has 13 XP. And if we go here and look at him, he has this red star, yellow star. That means that he's on the Hall of Fame. And so he got the tough skin ability. So he has increased protection even more. And he has this as long as he remains within the Hall of Fame. So now his protection is 24. Plus 3 from heroic ability. Now, this gets into a separate thing about natural protection combining with armor. Because this heroic ability is plus 3 natural protection. So he has an armor value of 23. And a natural protection of 3. That doesn't equal 26. And there's a really annoying formula when combining armor and natural protection. They don't just add together. Basically, the higher values you have, the less effective it is to combine the two. So he really only gets plus 1 out of it when they combine, but still, it's better than nothing. All right, and we have taken Pavonia. And so we have taken Pavonia. Our dominion has spread further to the kingdom of Dara. And so now we are getting an income of 48 from this province every turn. Our income has gone up. We are getting... So the resources... This province generates 21 for itself now. But our income or our resources in Ulm has gone up because we took this and it's connected. So we actually, we were at 2 resources last turn. So now we have an extra 14 here. Because there wasn't much to get out of this province. It's just plains with a river. It's not really resource heavy. But this number just represents what's here to gain, to benefit from in this province. Because you can recruit from almost any province. And so if we go into the recruitment screen here in Pavonia, we can see we can make different types of units. Non-Ulm units. We can make those militia. We can make archers. We can make heavy infantry. Or normal commanders and stuff like that. Generally, it's not really recommended to recruit this stuff. Your money is better spent elsewhere. Your money is almost always better spent on your own national units that are unique to your nation, and not this generic stuff. They can fill certain gaps in your army composition, like if you don't have any archers within your whole nation, maybe you might want to pick up some archers from an independent source, because they are okay. But getting like militia and just, I have 21 resources here, they're going to go to waste if I don't spend them. That is just not a good usage of your money, of your gold. So don't really bother with militia. But there are certain units you might want to grab if they fill a certain gap that you need filled, such as archers if you don't have any archers, or maybe you get like aquatic units if you want to go into the water. There are certain things like that. Mages are probably the most common thing that you might get. Certain provinces will allow you to recruit independent mages, like a druid or something like that. And if you don't have any access to nature magic, that might be a viable option for you to get into nature magic. But most of the time, you're not going to want to recruit this kind of stuff. Okay. This video is running a bit long again, so I'd like to kind of wrap this up. So I might have to do a third video just covering magic forging and magic casting and stuff like that. But we at least got one battle in. So we're now at 2 mages, and our research is increased to 22 per month. That's plugging along. We can now go to Newland. That's going to have the heavy cavalries, the light cavalries, and more militia. But I think we probably can win this and without suffering too many losses. I mean, possibly no losses. It depends on some dice rolls there. But if we select both of our things, and you can select, so you can select one, and then if you hold Control or Shift, you can select other ones. So they'll be grouped together and move together. And we're going to move them here. And we're going to move our spy. And he doesn't have swimming. This isn't frozen over, so he can't cross rivers. So he'd have to go like all the way around if he wanted to go this way. But we could go to Bay Pond and try and keep exploring that way. All right, and then that's basically it. So we're short still on resources. We have a lot of money to spend. We have a lot of recruitment points to spend. We just don't have resources, even though we took productivity 3. And that's because we need to get resources from the surrounding provinces. And unfortunately, in this case, we got kind of unlucky where we were just surrounded by all kind of empty plains, whereas Ulm really wants to be surrounded by like mountains and, you know, things like that that give a lot of resources. But it is what it is. You know, you can never really be sure where you're gonna start. So we can throw in another guy in there just to kind of, because this will pool over, so you may as well not waste the 16 there. And then yeah, I could get into magic and magic forging, but I guess we'll save that for a third video. Okay, so we're going to end another turn. And we will watch this second battle. So if you press F, it'll go to kind of double speed. If you press turbo or T, it'll go to even faster speed. And here comes the heavy cavalry charging in. So they hit the front line. You can see, I think already one guy died from the lance charge. That was kind of inevitable. But they're going to make pretty quick work. Once the heavy cavalry switches over to their broadswords, it's going to be much harder to kill our infantry. And we're going to make kind of short work of them, especially with our battle axes coming in. The militia is coming to join them slowly. And then Raderick is racing around back to deal with the commanders back there. But they are actually, they do have some bodyguards. So that could be kind of dangerous. He ran into a fleeing horse. We have killed all the heavy cavalry. We have routed the militia. And now Raderick is dueling the enemy heavy cavalry. Okay, we have routed the enemy priest. Okay. Still a commander that's there, and still a horse, and some light cavalry that shoot bows, but now we have routed everything. So when they're routing, they basically run just in a straight line, you know, off the side of the map. Anything they bump into, they will not go around, but they'll just start trying to hit it. So you can get caught where you have enemies that have attacked rear, and then the army routes, and then they get caught by this fleeing mob of troops fleeing to the east. And they can get caught in there and actually die that way from routing troops. But Raderick is too good for that. He didn't suffer any damage. The Unicorn didn't suffer any damage. And he got a bunch more kills. So that's why he's pretty strong. Not to be overestimated. Confidence is a slow and insidious killer. But he is pretty strong for our purposes for these first little battles. So that one, you know, I wasn't too worried about, but heavy cavalry can be quite dangerous, especially if you don't have super high protection values. Right. So because of the heavy cavalry charge, they got 2 kills, and we lost 2 infantry. It is what it is. You know, you're almost always going to have some losses in a lot of battles. That's war. But we killed 2 of the 3 mounted commanders, all 6 heavy cavalry. We killed 10 of the 18 militia. And then for the light cavalry, you see it's a 3+3. So we killed 3 light cavalry entirely. Or we killed 3 of the riders at the very least. And then 3 more lost their horses. And so that's the thing where I said, like, if they lose their horse, they can be rehired for half cost at the nearest fort. But it basically counts as you losing the unit. Like, if this were an actual army and he looked at his setup, he would have 0 light cavalry in his army. So he would have to rehire those at half cost. Okay, and now we have Newland. Generates another 64 income for us. It has 15 resources of its own. And Ulm has gone up by a little bit more, so now we can get even another guy added onto this list. So we can really get a lot of troops. And we have over 1,000 gold now. Okay. I think that's a good stopping point. So, I mean, at this point, I think you probably would have enough information available to you to win a game as Ulm. Especially against easy AI on defensive, I think you could pretty easily win that game. Just following the tips that I've told you, you know how stats work, you know how to form, do formations. You could easily, at this point, hire some Black Knights and put them with Rhetoric or whatever and attack rear. And if you had 20 Black Knights, they could easily win almost every independent battle just attacking the rear like that. Very powerful stuff. You don't need to know anything about magic, really. You could easily win a game as Ulm without casting a single spell. So don't feel like if you just want to get in and go at this point, feel free. I mean, you can mess around with magic, and you know how to research. You know how to script spell casting, because I showed you that. And you can just mess around with some spells and get to it. But you don't need anything to win against these sort of fights, because your troops are just so strong, as you've seen. But if you're interested in magic and want to learn more about that, we will cover that next time. For now, though, my name is Meg. This has been How to Play Dominion 6, and I'll see you fine folks next time.